Inflation has been affecting consumers around the country this past year, with food, clothing, and automobile prices shooting higher. A survey from the AP and the NORC shows that Americans claim that during this time they are buying significantly less of their certain essentials, things that they used to be buying before, like meat, down significantly. They're also driving less. Joining us right now is Frank Luntz. He's political strategist and pollster from FIL Inc. And Frank, these are kind of surprising numbers, particularly when you hear time and time again how strong the economy is, how much more flush consumers are, how many more people have jobs.
And that's the whole problem. There's a complete disconnect between what they're being told and what they're experiencing. The reason why inflation is so important politically and economically, it's universal, it's ubiquitous, and it's understandable. Everyone, everywhere, regardless of whether you're the host of a cable news show or whether you clean up at night, you are affected by inflation. It's completely ubiquitous. It doesn't matter whether you're putting gas in your car, putting food on the table, whether you're trying to even buy that car. It affects you everywhere, and it affects everyone. And it's immediately understandable. People feel it every single day. I think that this is going to have a much bigger impact on the electoral outcome in November than things like the Voting Rights Act or January 6th. This is hitting people where they live. It's creating anxiety. We did a session last night with 14 swing voters. Every one of them thought inflation was a bigger issue than January 6th. This is as big a deal as it gets.
Frank, if that's the case, I mean, that has to be impacting the president's approval ratings at this point. But when it comes to inflation, that's a much trickier problem to try and solve. You can't spend your way out of it.
And you can't blame the Republicans. This is something that's only happened over the last year. It may not be Joe Biden's responsibility, but the public is increasingly thinking it's his fault. And the consequences of that are significant on Democrats in the upcoming elections. It's one of the reasons why you see falling support for Build Back Better, and you see the president's ratings dropping on almost every single issue. He's now in the upper 30s. To put this in context, Joe Biden is less popular at the end of his first year than Donald Trump was when he was president. Nobody ever expected that.
So if you look at the problems, again, CPI, the consumer prices this year showed 7% gains year over year. That's the highest going back to all the way June of 1981. But the president can look at this and say, OK, this is because of the logistical problems and the supply chain problems that we're having and the labor issues that are all related to COVID. What can he do about this? I don't know how he can fix what's kind of gotten out of the barn at this point.
Well, the first thing they can do is stop telling people that things are great and start empathizing with them. Start demonstrating that you understand, that you feel their pain, as Bill Clinton used to say. His communication is completely wrong at this point because he's telling people you should feel great. You should be up on your feet. Things are coming back again. And nobody feels that way. Don't tell them that happy days are here again when you're in the middle of the Great Depression. No, we're not there. But that disconnect is causing him significant political trouble. And for the business community, they need to be careful because they're going to get targeted. If I'm an automotive dealer, if I'm in the food industry, I'm afraid that I'm going to become a political target. I'm raising my prices because my wholesale costs more, because shipping costs more, everything costs more. But the politicians who don't want to be held responsible are going to try to find a scapegoat. And those would be the two that I'd be most nervous about this morning.
We spoke with an auto retailer yesterday who was talking about how, for one thing, the manufacturers are making the more expensive cars because they're looking for ways to find the higher margin items. So you can't walk into a dealership and not get a fully loaded vehicle. The ones that do arrive disappear immediately. And then there are charges that the auto retailers are adding additional charges on top of that. Again, you can understand how these things kind of work their way down the pike.
Someone's going to be held responsible, and it takes a while for inflation to be felt. So this was actually having an impact months ago, but we didn't really feel it until Thanksgiving and Christmas. But it takes even longer to forget it. So let's say that the president is successful in stopping these price increases. It'll be 6 months before the public recognizes it. It's why I wonder why in Washington they're spending so much time on political issues and social issues and cultural issues, when inflation is actually the voting issue of 2022. It's going to have an impact on what we think of corporations. It's going to have an impact on what we think of our political leadership. That's what the public is talking about. That's what Washington should be addressing.